Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott, and happy to have on the show with us tonight, as we're going to talk about a little bit about track design, layout, and, of course, his own layout. Welcome to the show, Isaac Fabris. Isaac, how are you?
Howdy. How's it going?
It's great to have you here on the show. We've been talking for some time, almost around the first episode when we had Joe Mammy on, and Joe Mammy is a big fan of yours, and he said, you got to get Isaac on the show, and we've finally been able to put some time together to chat a little bit about your layout and doing some track design, and we're going to talk about a bunch of other things as well, but let's get started right in the beginning. What got Isaac into model railroading?
I like to tell people that I never really got out of it as a kid. I had the requisite Thomas the Tank Engine wooden stuff, and my dad had a coworker who was downsizing his HO collection, and so he bought a sizable chunk of some of his stuff, just ragtag stuff. It was mostly blue box stuff, but a bunch of different road names and different diesels and whatnot. And we set up a little 4-foot square circle loop of track, a brass track, on a sheet of plywood, and lit it down in my bedroom, and I was hooked.
Was it model railroading first, or was it the prototype that really got you into trains? Was it which came first for you?
It was definitely more of a model railroading, and the more, it's not, I guess, I don't want to say toy sense, but in a non-prototype way, was where I started, and I evolved from there.
What area did you grow up in?
I grew up in Central Illinois, Clinton in particular. I'm still in central-ish Illinois, but the Clinton was a huge railroad town back in the day, and it's kind of a shell of its former self now.
Was it any bit more active when you were younger than it is now? Did you get to see any trains when you were growing up?
Not significantly. It's been a pretty podunk little town in terms of railroad activity for all my life.
Sure.
Yeah.
What was the history of it before? Do you know that?
Yeah, of course. It was Clinton was kind of the one of the major hubs of the Illinois Central,
okay.
Especially the charter line. The original Illinois Central right away went. The midpoint was at Clinton. It was Division Point. The IC tracks once radiated out of Clinton in 6 different directions.
Wow.
It still does about 3 of those, but one of those is stubbed, and the rest is a lonely branch line that sees basically one local a day.
And who's running on that line now?
CN.
Okay, so CN is still
on model now.
Okay, yeah. So the CN, and you obviously bought the. When did CN buy IC? The Illinois
CN got the IC in 1999, which consequently is the year I was born.
Okay. So. Yeah, so there's more than just a little tie into that whole merger.
And
it was the year.
This family was worked on the IC, so.
Okay, great.
Ties run pretty deep.
Yeah, that for sure. So, grow up. You're now, of age, and you've purchased a home. I notice in your posts here, you've got a great group that's around your progress of the layout. Tell us about what you're building.
Yeah, so I'm building the CNIC Heyworth Spur. Breaking that down, CNIC for the first decade or so after the merger, after '99, the CNIC merger, even official IC or CN timetables were titled CNIC as kind of a joint venture. CN fully owned them, and they were fully a CN operating subsidiary. But on paper, and even still today, the IC still exists. Same goes for a lot of the other fallen CN flags, like the Grand Trunk Western, the EJ&E, and all the other ones. The Heyworth Spur is a branch spur, whatever you want to call it, that runs out of Clinton, again, my hometown, northbound towards Bloomington, Illinois, but stops short in Heyworth, Illinois, which is the next town south of Bloomington. And there's one town between Heyworth and Clinton, which is Wapella. My layout starts staging representing Clinton, comes right into the middle of Wapella, which is a tiny little town of probably a couple hundred people. There's a single siding there. It's a passing siding. It's a double-ended siding in real life, but mine is stub-ended for an interest of actually space, but also I wanted to force the industry there to be worked from a certain direction. I didn't want the industry to be worked from staging. You keep going. There's a fertilizer dealer kind of in the middle of nowhere between the two towns. You cross the county line, which I'm going to represent on my layout. Then you come into Heyworth, which is kind of the reason for the line's continued existence. If it wasn't for this elevator in Heyworth, the line probably wouldn't exist. There's a large elevator, which is now owned by Staley Tate & Lyle, the grain conglomerate, that has the ability to load grain trains. In real life, they load about 105 cars. My layout, unfortunately, only loads about 10 to 12, and that's my grain train. But that's all I could fit.
A little compression there.
Just a little bit. And then if you go past Heyworth a little bit, just into the country, just out of city limits, there is a switchback and peninsula to a lumber yard. It was called Carter Lumber. It probably went out of service a little before my era, but I used my modeler's license to kick it back into my era a few years and get a little more busy.
I was going to ask you that. You're speaking of modeler's license of the industries that you have on your layout now. How many of them are actually true to the prototype, and how many have you taken modeler's license with?
So all four of the industries once did exist on the line. And I have proof of that from IC track charts from 1999 that you can find actually for free on the IllinoisCentral.net website. The two elevators both still exist, and the larger of the two is still rail served, but that's it for 2022. Back in 2008, the Wapella elevator was open, and it got in fertilizer. There's an adjacent fertilizer dealer that got in phosphate and CSX hoppers from Florida, and probably some potash as well from Canada. Okay. And then both of the other fertilizer dealer and the lumber yard both existed, but have been long out of service. So all four of them existed, but only one of them still exists in 2022.
So for the most part, I mean, you could pretty much call yourself really more of a prototype modeler than you would say freelance, for sure.
For sure. If I backdate a couple years, it would be strictly prototype.
What got you? I mean, you obviously picked it because you live close to that. You grew up around it. Talk about the research that you had to do, because you're talking about 99 CN buys IC the same year you were born, and so there's a lot of research. Talk about that process.
It kind of happened really fast. Backtrack a little bit. That's something I should have mentioned earlier. Is before I really got into prototype modeling, and I was kind of getting in there, but not quite where I am now. I fancied myself a BNSF modeler just because I like to paint skiing. And then a lot of the blue box engines that my dad had got me from that collection, there was a sizable chunk of those that were Santa Fe and BNSF. And being frugal or whatnot, I wanted to use all those engines, so what better to do than BNSF? But then I realized that Clinton was the railroad that ran through my hometown was the CN and the IC, and I have multiple grandparents and other relatives who worked for the IC. And I ended up doing some research and finding out that the IC had even cooler power. And particularly after the CN bottom out, there's quite a rainbow on the roster.
Sure.
That I made the switch. So I modeled 2008 because the IC had a lot of SD40s and 40-2s. And sadly, CN decided to scrap a lot of those shortly after 2008 and 2009 and 10. So after doing a little bit of research and kind of sliding into the prototype scene, I realized I'd been missing out, and I settled pretty hard on 2008 CNIC because I get to run such a variety of power. And
so is that the power that you now have for your layout?
Yes, almost exclusively. I've gotten rid of a lot of my other excess power, and I've slowly built up my roster so that it's very very accurate for the CN and particularly the fall of 2008.
Yeah, I think that's kind of common with quite a few modelers that, when things happen to their railroad, their prototype railroad that don't happen, that's about the perfect time to say, oh, now we've stopped time, and this is the era.
It's kind of my transition period. It's why all the steam era and stuff. That's why this transition era is so popular, and for the same is why I picked my era.
And I even know guys that have done it later. When railroads make mergers and acquisitions, they're a business just like any other. When it comes to mergers and acquisitions and changes and management changes and paint scheme changes and whatnot, they'll just say, you know what, this is the line. This is where the era ends for me, and then they kind of put the stop to it, and you're able to kind of control it that way, which is kind of a pretty
positive effect on my budget as well.
Yeah, that's another key part, and part of your budget and everything else. I want to really talk about this room that you've put the layout in, because you share pictures in your group on there, and you've got a really nice finished basement, and and what's really impressive to me is you've resisted the temptation to go big, because you have the space for it there. You can see it there, and I even noticed that somebody kind of tried to egg you on about adding on, and I liked your little response. Refer to end of track was your response. But I mean, it must be really.
Those were comments from some friends from school that were all in good fun.
Oh, absolutely, but. I think everybody kind of eggs each other on, kind of, hey, if you're trying to spend somebody else's money, it's always fun. So egg them on to try to put a little bit more layout in the room. But you've resisted that. And I want you to talk about that kind of like mental process of, as you're going in, you've bought this home, you see this basement that you have. Was it finished when you bought the house?
Yeah, I got really lucky in finding this house. When I did, I had looked at kind of the whole spectrum of houses, some that complete fixer-uppers, some that were not nice but didn't have a finished basement, and then this one came along, and I was like, gotta have it.
Yeah, you scored big, and and it's already, you're walking into perhaps a turnkey finished basement, and where you could go. I wasn't expecting it at all. Yeah, so you could go completely crazy, but you didn't. And I want you to talk about that. Some of the things that you were in your decision to build the layout that you're building now. What kept you from going nuts?
A lot of it is just knowing my tendencies, or I say lack thereof. That I'm a pretty big procrastinator when it comes to stuff that doesn't have a deadline to anyone else. I not work stuff, sure. Hobby stuff particularly, obviously. I'm very, very I know myself very well that I procrastinate a lot. In fact, my original goal was to have all tracked down and wired, operational, basically, no scenery, by Easter. And we're just now getting to track down, yet let alone wiring. So you can see how that went, even with as simple as layout as mine. So Easter kind of became 4th of July-ish and then some. Yes.
And that's okay. But yeah, knowing yourself and what what time you're able to devote to it, or want to devote to it, or seems like
another aspect of it is my attention span, being, I guess, just young. I'm 23. Sorry. Yep. I can do a 3-4 hour op session at somebody else's house, but if I'm just running by myself or a friend, my attention span is significantly shorter. And not to say that I can't stretch my layout out and make larger ops or longer op sessions, which I do plan to do with a small group of operators. It's primarily for me, and I don't need a 3-hour op session every other night. I just need a little quick fix, and as Joe would mention with his single switch layout, which I actually have one of those as well.
Okay. When did you build that? Obviously, that was before you started your layout.
I built before that. So I said my first layout was that loop of track. It kind of evolved from there. My dad and I built the 4x8. I just had a loop on it, nothing glued down. We then added a 4x4 to it, so it was an 8x8L. Okay. We built the Atlas Super Pretzel. Well, I built the Atlas Super Pretzel, which, if you know from those old Atlas books, is very much a pretzel and spaghetti bowl and then some.
Yep.
And I made it even more spaghetti bowl. And that I had that probably late junior high, early high school.
Okay.
And then my my evolution kind of started rolling. I started to take tracks out, simplify things. I eventually got to the point where I had it was rebuilt into a U shape, and that was a big step for me because it was more of a shelf layout. It was a lot simpler, but it still lacked direction, and I didn't have the knowledge of track planning for operations that I do now. And I realized that, and thus tore it all down. And then I kind of stumbled upon and also organically came up with the idea for the single switch layout, both from reading a lot of Lance Meinheim, no surprise there.
Yep.
And also realizing that that was also me kind of being honest with myself about my procrastination, being like, I don't know, I'm going off to college in a couple of years, I'm not going to be able to finish this. And, so the single switch spur was born, which is what I like to call mine. Roll off the tongue pretty nicely.
Yeah.
And that was the first layout I ever finished, air quotes, to relative completion with scenery and a few details and operations, of course.
Absolutely. When you built this, and you're talking about doing this modeling in your middle school or what you have junior high and high school, did you find yourself to be kind of lone wolfish, or did you have a group of friends that were kind of into it as well?
I was very lone wolfish. I had friends who were supportive, but not also into it. I was pretty lone wolfish. I had a few friends that were not local, but I was pretty lone wolf.
Yeah, so that was just kind of neat. So you're kind of gathering information, and you're fortunate enough to be in the more of the information age. So I'm sure you were. What were some of your other resources? As you talked about Lance and some of the information you got from him. So what were some of the other resources you were using to gather information?
That's a good question. Back then I wasn't on Facebook really, or much social media at all really, at least in junior high and early high school. But I had Google, of course.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of the forums, the MRH forums, although I never had an account. I scrolled and lurked a lot on those. YouTube for sure. A couple of the infamous ones I can't tell you off the top of my head, but a lot of the big name YouTube HO scale model prototype model railroads for sure were inspirations.
Oh, definitely, and I talk about it now, and even then, with YouTube and Google, and now we've got so many other avenues as well. How much, we live in a great era of model railroading where all that information is right there. And we can connect, we can see other people, we can share. Heck, guys from, Eastern Connecticut and, you're out in Illinois, and being able to connect and talk about layouts and stuff. It's really a cool era, and you certainly have taken advantage of it, even early on, to get that information. So one of the things, and we're jumping around a little bit, but heck, we can do that, I guess.
That's my specialty.
What's that? That's your specialty? Yeah, well, you're on the right show for that, that's for sure. We'll jump around a little bit here. But one of the things I wrote on my notes, that you started your track design, and we talked a little bit about what you're including. One thing that struck me in very quickly is your track height. Now, how tall of a guy are you, Isaac?
I am 5'8".
Okay.
5'9".
Okay, so you're I would say an average height.
Average to low, middle.
Yeah, okay.
Average.
Yeah. So, but you've built your layout. How high is your layout?
It is 59 to 60 inches or so, somewhere in there.
So,
which equates to about my nose height, maybe chin, somewhere in the nose to chin area.
Yeah, talk about that, because I think you've definitely done something really cool with perspective there.
Yeah, it's all about perspective. You nailed it on the head there. Hit it on the head, whatever. It's all about perspective. I've never really enjoyed the helicopter view of a layout that so many seem to have. I mean, you can always sit down on a lower layout, use a rolling chair. But I don't think I've ever actually been to one who does, at least exclusively. Especially now, I work a desk job. I'm an engineer, and I sit down all day, and I come home, I don't really want to sit down anymore, at least in general. So I'm more than happy to stand up and view my layout and stretch my legs.
Yeah, no doubt. And then, I just really think that's cool. I mean, you built it up really high for, whatnot, and, for your height, and you built it to that, really what you see real trains in real life,
Exactly.
at that level.
Exactly. That was part of it was rail fanning, and I never rail fanned from a helicopter. I've used a drone a couple times, but that's about as close as I've gotten.
Now and rail fanning, I know that you've been doing quite a bit of that. I've seen some photos. You got some great photographs on your personal page, and you've shared a few. Talk about the impact that's had on your layout, because I'm sure there's a lot of takeaways when you go out in the field and watch the trains and then come back.
Yeah, I kind of got a late start, and everybody kicks themselves for not doing something earlier, but I got a late start in at least formal rail fanning with the camera and whatnot, and actually seeking out trains rather than just, hey, that's a train, I'm going to stare at it until it passes. And luckily, and coincidentally, it was what I ended up modeling. I don't think that's a coincidence at all, actually. I never really had or did any formal rail fanning during high school, really. But when I went off to college, community colleges and university afterwards, I was pretty well into it. It was just an evolution of the love of trains that I've always had, and particularly just the mass and the presence of an engine rolling by you. I love switching, no surprise.
Yep.
But I love sitting. Part of the reason that got me from more of a model railroad and more into prototype railroading was that rail fanning and watching them switch and wondering what car types were, what different cars were hauling and whatnot, was a big impetus for that.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on one piece that I kind of as well, because I do my own rail fanning and photography, and one of the things that you talk about getting us a late start, and I feel that way sometimes as well. Like, I kind of missed that golden era of my railroad. It's like I missed all this good stuff. I missed the Conrail era. I missed but I guess the hard part is to try to remember that the era will change yet again, and we're capturing it now. So it's like it just kind of stay motivated to keep capturing it, because it eventually.
I've said that before. I went to community college in Decatur, Illinois, which is a huge railroad town. And there's a diamond with the Norfolk Southern and the IC. They're in the middle of town. And I always said that I'm going to shoot every NS-9 that comes across here, because one day they're not going to be as common as they used to. Those are Dash 9s, the SD40s of today, and now Gevos and whatnot. But I actually stay away from all those GEs in my modeling era, for the most part.
Yeah, but I mean, at least for the rail fanning aspect, just capture it, because eventually the era will change. The
Exactly.
colors will change. The railroads will change. That history does repeat itself, and just stay kind of just capture it and have fun with it.
Yeah, my prototype hasn't changed a ton since I was born, even. But even if I had started rail fanning, if I had started rail fanning during my era of 2008, I would have been 9 years old. So not much to do there. But even if I would have rail fanned a couple of years earlier than I did, in my high school years, maybe after I turned 16 and got a license, I could have caught, at least for me, some drastically different power on the same local, which I've chased. Probably the thing I've chased and photographed and rail fanned the most is the local that runs out of my hometown. It's called the Clinton Local.
Yep.
And that's kind of my obsession.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I got a layup right here in my town with the Providence and Worcester. That's what I model, and it's just so easy to capture them. It's right here, and it's hard to resist going by. As much as I've shot them about 100 times, it's still a fun thing. Do you find yourself rail fanning alone more, or do you have a group of friends or friends that you go out with to do your rail fanning?
lately I haven't been doing as much. And I certainly haven't been posting as much. I haven't posted in a long time, but I still go rail fanning and share it with a small group of friends. I have a fairly solid group of fans who are also rail fans. Most of them are also model railroaders, but some of them aren't. But I don't. A lot of them are local-ish, but not local as I see them every day. There's a few that I do see more regularly, but it's a bit of both.
What would be a good tip to somebody that wants to be a good rail fan buddy? What's a good thing that you need to know to be a good rail fan buddy that's going to go out with Isaac? What do you need to be? What do you need to know?
I don't know. Keep your eyes and ears open and give heads ups. I'm sure you've got some P&W heads up groups and whatnot on Facebook. The common one in my area is Central and Southern Illinois railroads. That's a big heads up group for kind of, like I said, Central and Southern Illinois railroading. I'm in Peoria, Illinois now, which is also a big railroad town, river town. And there's a group for that, and that's huge. You see a train, you post, hey, I see this train, it's going this direction, in this location, this time, this is the power, whatever.
Yeah, that's
somebody else can go catch it.
Yeah, that's definitely a big piece there to be able to share information and whatnot. I'll tell you, If I go out with somebody, I tell you the one thing I compare it to, and then some people think it's odd, like you go out rail fanning and you're sitting trackside, you hope to see a train, you hope to see something going on and whatnot. And I said, well, it's to me, it's like fishing. It kind of that parallel. Like you're going to go out, you're going to sit there or stand there, and you may or may not get anything. And at the end, you're hungry the same way. And it's like, just getting other guys to do that. And you have good rail fan buddies that know you can't just go 10 minutes and then leave. You've got to be, it's just like fishing. You can't just throw the hook in the water. Oh, I got nothing. Let's move to the next spot. You got to
know where the fish are too.
Yep, exactly. You got to know where the fish are, and you got to be patient and understand that, hey, schedules are different and sometimes delays happen and you just kind of just go back and run. But it's funny. I find so much peace being rail, trackside. Just, it's a good stress reliever. I've got, some pretty stressful jobs in engineering. I'm sure you get where you can just go out there and clear your mind and be out with the trains. Just something very refreshing about it.
Yeah. On that note, I find myself kind of getting sucked into the camera a little too much lately these days, and not actually enjoying the passing of the train and whatnot, and actually experiencing it, listening to the prime mover, which is one of my favorite things, is that low rumble, that bass. And I really tried to stop, and I take my one shot, and then I just sit there and bask in all of its glory.
Absolutely.
As it passes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get you. But, it's kind of like, you get behind you don't want to always have to see it from behind the camera. You want to be able to experience have that trackside experience. So, going back to the model railroading side of things, I know one of the other things that you also do, you've worked on track design for other folks, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, because we get quite a bit of email, and anybody that's listening now would love to get your feedback around the layout at gmail.com, and we've had some people email in, and one of the requests was talking about starting a layout, and I wanted to talk to you, and we talked a little bit about Joe Mammy in the first episode, but kind of that thought process and kind of your recommendations of things that somebody that's starting in the hobby, that's got to a point where they say they want to, carve out some real estate in their home to put a layout up, and what's the next step? So what would you recommend to somebody that's coming to you saying, hey, I think I've picked out a room, I've got the wife's permission to put something up. What would you say to them? What are the things that they are going to need to do to get started?
I don't remember what Joe said, but I have a hunch that I'm going to echo him a lot, because, as I'm sure as he told you, we have pretty similar thoughts on this. I would say three things, all similar to what we've already talked about. Pick an era and a prototype. That's one thing. And it doesn't have to be as strict as I have. Pick at least a genre of railroad, and and at least a decade, if not a single year or a couple years, to kind of focus on if you want to actually be a prototype modeler, that is. Even still. Second is be realistic with yourself, your time expectation, your motivation, which comes in handy with me. My tendency for procrastination. Be really brutally honest with yourself about that. Don't. We always hear about the armchair modeler, right? And Joe and I have both preached about the single switch spur or the one turnout layout for those armchair modelers who always dream and stuff about their dream layout,
Yep.
But never build it. Yet they have more than enough room for a small layout. I was actually, for a while, they're pretty active in this group called Micro and Small Model Railroads on Facebook, and that was kind of actually that might have been where Joe and I met. But that was number 2.
Let's focus on that a little bit. Let's talk about that one a little bit, because that's a really important one, and I want to really drill home for somebody that's on the fence that, hey, I'm not sure, or you start laying out this ton of bench work, but you've never done it before. That single switch, or what the layout that Joe Mammy calls the instant on layout, or I think there's about 3 or 4 names for about the same thing. One turnout, single spur, whatnot. It really is a great way to test yourself, to see where you're at, where your head's at. And you don't even need a whole lot for it. You can do it for budget dollars. You don't need a really fancy locomotive. It doesn't have to pull a lot of weight because it's flat and short. So you just need to get something that works well. I would highly recommend the NCE Power Cab, because it's a very simple setup for a one-switch layout. Plug in and you've got everything you need right there.
I actually operated mine for a while when I was kind of prototyping the concept on DC.
Yeah, so even if you want to go, back to to DC, or if you want to do DCC, it's still very simple. But yeah, it gives you that test. You can do a lot of things on. How long was your
Mine's 8 foot, but I've used varying lengths of staging stick on the end. Originally it was 3 foot, so 11 foot total, but 8 foot of scenic layout.
Sure. So within 8 feet, a strip, foot and a half, 2 feet wide or so, and 8 feet wide, you can do a lot on that.
Yeah, you don't need that much width. Mine's 12 inches wide, and I believe Joe's is like 8 or something like that.
Yeah, Joe's was very, very narrow, so you can fit this as a shelf in a small room. And then you can still do a lot of scenery, still do build skills and track work, and making sure that things are right, wiring, all the things that you are going to need to know how to do to build a big layout. So I want to make sure.
And a whole op session. You could do I've done up to like 30, 40-minute op sessions on a little layout.
And even on mine's more of a switching layout. It's a little bigger, but I can tell you how much more I fell in love with my layout when I took in one area, I added a switcher that was already in place. Because I could go down and I had an instant on layout. Of course, I had stuff to the left and right, but that really didn't matter. I could go down there, even just for 10, 15, 20 minutes, just move some cars around. And how much more I enjoyed it, because I didn't have to pull an engine out of the barn, get it hooked, go down the ladder, out to wherever. It was right there. Just go grab the switcher, do a little bit of switching. And I think that, for that, that's what these switching layouts provide to somebody that's getting started in testing their passion for the hobby, see how deep they really want to go.
For sure.
So let's get to that third point. I cut you off. So let's talk about some other things that, if you're a new modeler and you're thinking about building your layout or layout, some things you should need to think about.
Third one's easy, and it's kind of connected to just keep it simple. That wasn't technically one of the other two things, but this is how I was earlier in my model railroading careers, was just throwing track at stuff, throwing switches at stuff, and we just covered it. But that was the third thing, is just keep it simple.
Yeah, for sure. And even going back to the point I made earlier about what you've built for your layout, you had this room that you could have done double deck. You probably could have shoved the helix somewhere. You could have done all this, but you didn't. And not for anybody. I mean, if you want to build that kind of railroad, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think what you did was really cool, because one thing I can see when you start having operating sessions at your layout, your operators are going to be so comfortable working your layout. There's nothing behind them. There's nobody that has to pass them. There's just a nice amount of room they can even step back and look. Like, they don't even have to be up on top of the layout. I think you're really onto something with the way you've done this more simplistic design.
Yeah, and something I just thought of kind of a few minutes ago was I've never really put it in words this way, but I kind of am making my current layout, my larger layout, to be just a larger version of an instant on layout, right? If I were to operate that layout in that capacity, I would already have a train staged in staging, power on it, all blocked, and I would just make sure it's a short train, only working one or two industries. You go up the branch, switch those two industries, you come back, and it's an instant on layout, but it's a little bigger. Right,
and then you could run it. You can run one or multiple jobs, but yet you're able to go down there and be able to run the layout without a huge you don't need a big orchestrated event to make it happen.
Yeah, it can be. I run the local up to the lumber yard, which is the furthest industry, the northernmost industry on the layout. I swap one car and run and shove all the way back. Or I can have an entire op session where we run 2-3 grain trains, 2 locals, you know what I mean, and really milk it for all it's worth.
Absolutely. So layouts like this and another thing, so another big piece of information for anybody that's getting started and trying to figure it out, and this is an echo of what we talked about with Joe Mammy, is get out and see other layouts, as many as you can. That's one piece. Would you echo that same sentiment?
For sure, and that was something that I started evolving before I really I was able to do that. For whatever reason, despite there being a few layouts in the surrounding areas in my hometown, I never really got to any of them. I never really knew who owned them. Just wasn't in the right circles or whatnot. Didn't know the right people. Didn't join the right. Not join the right. I wasn't able to join any of those operating session groups or whatnot. But when I went to university in particular, which is down in Edwardsville, Illinois, which is basically St. Louis, that wall came down pretty quick, and I got to operate on a good chunk of layouts that was pretty eye-opening.
I'm sure there, for every layout you see, whether you go to, one, there's positive takeaways, there's negative takeaways. I mean, I can tell you that I've been to some layouts too, and I've looked at them and go, oh, no, they might work for you, but it isn't going to work for me. And I may not even tell you, obviously wouldn't tell the guy that, but there's positive and negative, and there's always great takeaways. George Celios and, the world famous Franklin in South Manchester. Now, that's not my style, but there's still takeaways. There's still, looking at, how small details can really drive a scene, and you can take that stuff away, although you may not build, craftsman kits for what seems like miles and miles of layout, but you still get those ideas. So one of the big things, and my mentor always shared with me, was to always get out there and see other layouts, and I'm glad, you're saying that you pretty much did the same.
Yeah, I was a bit late, but I definitely have, and I am now. In fact, there's one of my neighbors is also a moderator, just 3 doors down, or more than that, 4 or 5 doors down that way, is another guy with a model railroad, an in-scale railroad in his basement that I thankfully found pretty quickly after I moved here. And he put me in touch with kind of the round robin operating group of the area, and it was all the floodgates were opened after that.
How often are you operating with that group?
It's not an official group, I should say, but it's a bunch of email chains and whatnot. But I would say a couple times a month, 2-3 times a month minimum.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
I was actually at one of the layouts this past Sunday.
Oh, awesome. So what are the guys in the area? What are they modeling? So you talk about an N scale down the road. What's he up to?
Yep. So in Peoria is a big river town. There used to be a huge river town, and it still is.
Sure.
Countless railroads probably back in the day in the transition era for sure, and even later there's double digits of different railroads in town.
Sure.
And my neighbor closest to me, his name's Mike. He's got a layout. His layout's called the Great Lakes and Southern. It's freelanced in its history and ownership, but it's otherwise a prototype layout based upon the Peoria area. Excuse me. He's got a double and in a couple places triple deck N-scale layout in his basement, which isn't much. His basement footprint, at least, is about the same as mine.
N-scale obviously giving him the edge up on space, though. That's for sure.
Certainly.
And then who else you got in the area? What else do you find?
Well, I was at this past Sunday. His name's Alan. He has another CN layout, but in Wisconsin, modeled after Wisconsin. Is his prototype, the Wisconsin River Division. He doesn't have a Facebook group, but I need to post a few pictures of my obsessions on my Facebook group. I'll do that eventually. Yeah. He's got a layout, HO scale, probably also similar size, at least footprint of my basement, but single deck HO scale. CN, fairly modern, little later than I am, mid 2010s, 2015. And that's I really enjoyed operating that layout, mainly because it's CN and I like CN.
Sure.
But it's also just a really nice layout.
Do you find going to those operating sessions, you come home and it lights your fire again?
It does a little bit. It gives me that and inspiration, and I talk with other operators like, yeah, I gotta get my layout done. Kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of peer pressure. I'm
part of a little peer. It's good peer pressure.
Yeah, I encourage anybody. I mean, there's people that kind of keep to themselves, and I can understand that too. But when you start getting in a group, where you're in a group operating kind of thing, where you're going to different houses and seeing different layouts, and you're continuously doing that, boy, it just it starts to help the flywheel turn and keep it spinning. They'll add a little bit to it and just keep pushing that flywheel forward.
Sure.
So. A couple other things I noticed, your two things I noticed as you were building your layout. Talk about, I noticed you're using rolled cork, and you've tried that and whatnot. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that and how you found that.
I don't exactly remember how I found it. Sorry?
Something about Hobby Lobby or something you said you got it from?
Yes, it's from Hobby Lobby. If I recall correctly, I think my mom was trying to be helpful and said she found some at Hobby Lobby and bought me a roll, or she bought it for something else and then didn't end up using it and said, hey, could you use this? I'm like, wow, that's perfect. And it is kind of, for certain things, it's a continuous 10-foot roll of 2-inch by, it's about the same width or thickness as N-scale cork.
Okay.
It's 2 inches wide, square. It doesn't have a beveled edge. And it's not split down the middle, but it's got an adhesive back. It's not the greatest quality. My most recent, comment and post about that said I probably won't use it again. It's great for straight. It's great for laying straight stuff. But it's a pain in the butt to curve because, like I said, it's not split down the middle. That's why cork is split down the middle, so you can curve one. The outer end is longer than the inner one, just like curving flex track. But it's a pain in the butt to take a curve. You get to cut relief corners in it and cut up wedges of it, and it's a pain in the butt. So, it's also kind of expensive what it is. So
it kind of lends to the adage of experiment, but have a good putty knife available too. So
yes. So I used this layout just because I had bought some before I realized that there's probably better options. I like it. It's about like I said, it's N-scale cork height, but HO scale width, so it's perfect for a branch line, which is exactly what my layout is.
Sure.
I didn't want full height cork, at least for some of my layout. So it's perfect for that. But like I said, it's a pain in the butt to curve. And if I wanted to do a yard, I'd just get a cork sheet.
Yeah, sure.
So it might be good in some niche applications, but I probably won't be using it again.
Yeah, but credit to you to try it. Try something new, try something different.
It was good while it lasted.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot, that it can't be really undone with a little bit of elbow grease and some labor.
Yeah, it feels right up.
Just neat that you try some new stuff. I did notice that you've got some Macrail EOTs. You've got those added to your layout and for operation.
I just bought those from Spring Creek at the Galesburg, Illinois Model Train Show. I bought those, and I also bought some of their CN style air conditioners. In that era of 2008, they had a lot of modernized but not yet repainted old SD40s and Jeeps that were still in original paint, mainly GTW blue and icy black Death Star paint scheme. But they had been modernized with basically RV style air conditioners. But they're a little different than the RV style. But they're just rectangular air conditioners. They slap them on the roof, and you still see a lot of them today. But Macrail produced those, and I have a couple engines that need them, so I saw them and picked them up.
I actually added one to a switcher that I have that I didn't really pay attention to when I put the light in the cab, and the light was bleeding through the cab. I should have painted it black inside and built up, and I wouldn't bleed. But the light's bleeding, and I'm not taking the cab apart, because the moment I take that cab apart, all the glazing's going to fall out, and then I'm going to knock stuff over and break it. So that's exactly what I did. I picked up a Macrail AC and I put it right on the roof, and that takes care of that light. And now the crew in that switcher is happy because they got air conditioning going all year round in that thing. So so that was good. I actually got to meet Greg up at the show in Springfield, and it's funny, the Macrail EOTs are great, but I kept telling Greg, I said, I go to put them in and they keep falling out. So I got an actual lesson on those Macrail EOTs. You got to twist them to put them in. And then once he gave me the little bit of classroom on how to install them, now it's great. And I've added them to my layout. You're going to have a lot of fun with that as well. Another thing to slow operations down and give just that little bit more detail to.
It wasn't my idea, but I actually made my own of their flags from scratch right before they announced theirs. I think Joe Atkinson, he was an Iowa Interstate modeler. I've actually gotten to know him a little bit through a mutual friend. Him and a couple other people kind of came up with those, and I just took a paper clip, folded it up so it would fit in a KD58, a scale head, and took I think it actually was a sticky note. Cut a sticky note up, super glue it to the stick, painted it red, and hung it on a coupler and took it to the club.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives you that look. And like I said, it's always good to slow people down. When you have operations, to put the EOT on, to do those things that add that little bit more to operations. When you get to stuff. Yeah, when you get to operations, what do you have kind of in mind? Are you going to go with car card, waybills? You're going with switchless? Have you made that decision yet?
I have made that decision and then some already. I use JMRI. I've used it in the past for my single switch spur, and for a while there, between just during COVID, when I was doing school from online school, I was back at home, my parents' house. I did a little expansion for my single switch spur. I basically connected it to a shelf layout that had 2 more switches. And I used it to operate that. But I've actually got the entire operating session, or operating, what do you want to call it, JMRI ops panel for my new layout already up and running, and all kinks worked out. I actually have a couple new cars I need to put in my roster that I bought actually at the Galesburg show.
Sure.
But I used Train Player, which is you can import any rail file. AnyRail is the software I use to track plan. You can save an AnyRail file, an AnyRail track plan, as a file compatible with the Train Player program, and you can run trains in 2D on that track plan.
Oh, no kidding.
So I use that to prototype the JMRI the ops panel, and then function check it, and I still use it when I'm bored and don't want to go work on the layout.
Yeah, sure. That's fantastic.
So yeah, I've got switch lists for everything. I really go deep into trying to get cars to block right, not just block right, to pool right, and how industries like receive cars on a certain schedule, how many cars they get, car frequency and stuff like that. I've gone deep into that and tried to. I've still got some tweaking to do, but if my layout was operational tomorrow, I would have switch lists for it ready to go.
Oh, that's very cool. That's one of the very fun parts about, is understanding the industries. It's just when you can get beyond just moving plastic cars to sidings and understand that it's actual, what you're emulating is real rail, the real thing, that they're moving product. They're moving supply to a facility, or they're hauling out finished product, or whatever the case may be, to understand what it really is, where it came from, where it's going. It's such a it just builds a really neat understanding and an appreciation for what the railroad does.
Yeah, and that ties directly into one of my suggestions earlier. To pick a prototype, you can, if you have that, it makes finding cars for your layout that much easier. I still do this actually. If a new car comes out, or if I'm eyeing a car on eBay or something like that I want to get, I think might be in my era, but I'm not sure if it's in the right pool or if it would have been carrying the right commodity. Covered hoppers are my big thing. I love being in Illinois. Grain is named the gang.
Sure.
Great game, but also fertilizer, and that's all covered hoppers, but not the same covered hoppers. Sometimes similar covered hoppers, but there's a lot of nuance with that that I really enjoy researching. And I've even resorted to scrolling through tens of thousands of pictures on the databases, Railroad Picture Archives and whatnot, to try to find that one picture using Control F, the keyboard shortcut to find the right era, the right car number, and I find a picture and I look at the adjacent cars, see if they make sense or if it's in the right location, and I dive into that pretty deep.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's a very deep dark hole.
Well, no, and it's a good deep dark hole because it drives a passion, right? That you just want to have it right. And I can say I probably haven't gone that deep, but I've got my personal addiction is 50-foot high cubes. I've recently had to get a bunch of those for my lumberyard that I didn't already have. I had all my covered hoppers squared away, but I was like, shoot, all I have are a couple of old blue box 50-foot boxcars. I need a bunch of things, so I quadrupled my stash of 50-foot and 60-foot high cubes for plywood service. Yeah, and my big addiction, not only 50-foot cubes, Wisconsin Central 50-foot high cubes is
I have a couple of those.
Yeah, that's a soft spot for me. And then the Exact Rail. I wish I knew somebody from Exact Rail was listening to us, because I would beg them to do a new run of 50-foot TTX high cube boxes, just to drive the price down on eBay. Because holy moly, if somebody thinks they got that, they think they're worth a.
I've got a couple of the CN ones, waffle side 50-foot high cubes from Exact Rail.
And then they did, we're not a high cube, but a 50-foot. They did the waffle Southerns, and they did such a beautiful job on those Southerns. And I have a soft spot for them too, but my wallet's a little bit harder to get to on those when the price drives up. So I hope Exact Rail makes another run of those cars just to get them out there and hopefully drive some of that eBay pricing down. But
that's how center beams are too right now. My lumberyard is the biggest carload industry on the layout.
Yeah.
The elevator is the biggest industry, but it's not served by local. The most local traffic is from the lumberyard, so I had to build up my center beam and my high cube boxcar fleet to support that. I had a few, but it's grown quite a bit recently. Those two car types in my roster.
Yeah, and it's so hard, and then you start, like you said, you start seeing stuff, whether you're in pictures, and I kind of model modern era-ish, and I live right near the track, so I'll go by and I'll see something and I'm like, oh, I want that too. I got to find that, I want that car too. And it's definitely hard to keep the car counts down and when it comes to what you have, but it's really cool to do that research and learn what cars they actually use and where's it going, what's in it. And that's really neat research that you've done for your layout, and it kind of, like I said, it adds to that realism of the Heyworth sub and what you're representing.
For sure, yeah.
So, well, Isaac, we're going to wrap it up here. I really appreciate you coming on here. We've shared some really great information, not only on your layout, but for other modelers who are thinking about getting in the hobby or maybe just started and maybe need some next steps, some things to think about and whatnot. What's next for the Heyworth sub? What's your next big project for it?
Well, we just got to get it running. That's the big thing. Get it running, and then have a couple of the operating group friends over and have an op session.
Yeah, shake it down, all right, and,
exactly,
and whatnot. So, well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the updates on your Facebook group. We'll share some links. We'll share some photos up on the Facebook page for anybody who wants to go check those out. We'll share that on the the Around the Layout Facebook page. That's what I'm trying to get out. Facebook.com/Around the Layout. So definitely check that out and see some of the photos and the track plan that Isaac's working on. Isaac, thank you again for joining me on Around the Layout, and hope to have you back on again soon with more updates on the Heyworth sub.
My pleasure. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. You'll find more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Learn more about the show and check out past and future episodes on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks again for hanging out with us. Around the Layout.